I'm joined now by Mohammed Ali Kadivar, an expert on Iran at Brown University in the United States, and we're joining him in North Carolina. Thank you for coming on BBC News. Can you just tell me, how significant do you think these protests are?
Thank you for having me. I think the geographical spread of the protest is quite significant, especially when we compare this with the Green Movement of 2009, which only happened in Tehran. But in terms of the number of protesters, this is still quite small. The reports tell us this is in thousands, and that's not a big number comparing with Green Movement or even a student protest that we had in 1999 in Iran. In terms of radical slogans, I think also this has been important, and the fact that this has been reported and spread through the social media. Before, we have had protests in cities with socioeconomic demands, for example, in 1990 or 1991. But because internet didn't exist at the time, people in other cities didn't hear about those protests.
You mentioned the spread of these protests. It's interesting that they're happening in some quite conservative places, aren't they?
Yeah, this is interesting, and I think there's quite a consensus now among the experts that initially this might have been a plot by hardliners against Hassan Rouhani's administration to undermine his government. But this has clearly got out of their hand, because initially there were some down to Rouhani slogans among protesters, but then now there are slogans against the Supreme Leader Khamenei, and there are slogans against the rule of the clergy. So the slogans have radicalized. They started from socioeconomic demands, but they have escalated. But this is quite common in repressive regimes when there is no institutional venue for people to voice their grievances.
Now, Iranians remember, of course, what happened in 2009. They have seen what has happened in neighbouring Arab countries where there were uprisings. Do you think they have the stomach to keep on demonstrating if there is a tough and bloody crackdown?
I think that's very hard to predict. These waves of protests at these early stages are very fragile and unpredictable. If we go back to, for example, Arab countries, protests in Tunisia started at the same time with Algeria. Even in Algeria, it spread quickly to some neighbor towns, but it was contained in Algeria, and it spread wider in Tunisia and led to a regime change. It's still quite small in Iran. I think people who participated today probably made those decisions today. People probably that might participate are thinking tomorrow. Right now, there has not been much repression, so I don't think people are very scared. If more repression will be used by the regime, it can backlash and bring more people into the streets. But on the other hand, repression sometimes is successful as it was in 2009 in Iran.
OK, Mohammed, we'll leave it there. Mohammed Ali Kadivar there from Brown University.